Hello, my name is Andy Greenberg, and on behalf of Mariposa, I'm so glad that you've decided to join me and to learn a little bit about the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I will guarantee you this, that as we begin to have, I guess, our one-way discussion, you're going to learn things about the high holidays that you never knew before. And I will guarantee that to you. And even to the point where I might recommend that when we're done, you try and find your principal for your Hebrew school that you went to and ask for your money back because some of this stuff is going to be very interesting. By way of introduction, I am the spiritual leader for Mariposa and have been so since their opening, and we participate and lead Friday night services where we have a very, very nice group of residents that continuously return for our evening services. And we do them in Hebrew, we do them in English. It is back and forth discussion. And everybody really seems to enjoy both the spirituality and the meaning. And of course, after COVID is done, the what we used to do is get together for Kiddush, have our wine, have our challah, and have some really, really good discussions. And we're also involved in the Passover Seders, as well as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. And once a month, we do a lecture on Jewish topics that is also very well attended by the Jewish residents. I say this, and I'm not getting paid to say this, so I really want you to know this comes from the heart, that the Mariposa does a lot for the Jewish residents. For those residents that want to maintain their connection to Judaism, programs are offered, services are offered, and they really go out of their way, in my opinion, and residents' opinions too, to adhere to the spirituality, the identity, and the connection of the Jewish residents. So, with that being said, and that's not necessarily a paid advertisement, that's just what I do over at Mariposa. So let's talk about what you picked up in your bag and see what that exactly has to do with the holidays. And some of it, as I mentioned, you're going to be very, very surprised. Number one, you got a challah. Okay, what's the big surprise there? Well, you might notice that the shape of the challah is different than the shape of the challah that you normally have on Friday nights. And on Friday nights, it looks more like a loaf with the braids and the whole 9 yards. And on Rosh Hashanah, it is a round challah. Now, some of us might know the reason behind that, but if for those that don't, it represents the circle of life. And one of the things that Judaism does and is very heavy on, and some people might say to an overextension, unless you understand what the meanings are, is symbolism. Lots of what we do has symbols. So the challah is one of those where it represents the round life. On the other hand, there are traditions where the challah is not round and the challah is not in the traditional Shabbat format. So you might ask, what is it? Well, remember, life has its ups and downs. And I think we can remember that even in secular life, there's a suggestion that says the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. The less you put into something, the less you get out of it. And we're not going to debate that. But if you put a lot of things into something in the corporate ladder or in the world, you rise up on the ladder. Okay, if things don't necessarily go well, and many times it's in your control, some of the times it's not. But what happens? You go down on the ladder. So therefore, there are Rosh Hashanah challahs that are done in the shape of a ladder with rungs. And if you've never seen those, well, that's because not everybody does it. And frankly, I'm pretty certain it's really hard to bake and to shape. I know I certainly couldn't do it. I don't know if I would ever ask Carol, my wife, to do it. So that would be, well, number one. But do you know where the origin of the challah comes from? Is that because some baker said, hey, I'm tired of bagels, I'm tired of bialys, I'm tired of seeded rye or non-seeded rye, so let's come out with challahs? No, challahs actually go back to the time of the Torah, where the word challah is mentioned as part of the services that were done in for the high priests in the Torah as the Jewish people were traveling through the desert. In case you didn't know, the word challah is there. So let's go on to the next thing. Now you've got something rather strange, and that is an apple and honey. And I think most of us know this. Why do we have the apple and honey? Very simple. You dip the apple in the honey and you have a wonderful sweet year. Okay. If life was that good, and that simple, I should say, then we really wouldn't need that. But once again, there are some really deep meanings behind it. So, number one, why an apple? Why not any other fruit? Why not a peach? Why not an apricot? Why an apple? Well, the top of the line answer is an apple generally is sweet anyway, unless you happen to have a sour apple brand or yeah, certain, and I don't remember exactly what make it is, but there are apples that are not necessarily that sweet. So number one, you've got a sweet apple. Okay, that's fine. Number two, it represents red and white. Now, you might say to yourself, why red and white? That goes a little bit way too far. Don't that's crazy, Andy. But the mystics, the Jewish mystics say that the red and white, which are combined in the apple, are symbols of divine power uniting in harmony. All right, look, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not true. I'm certainly not going to be here to discuss it. But yet, if you take a look at the secular world, there are lots of superstitions that are out there. Black cats, don't walk under a ladder, etc., that we do adhere to. So whether or not this is true or not, it is part of the Jewish law as to why it's a law, yeah, which is why it is used. So why the sweetness? Well, that's pretty simple. We want to have a sweet year. And that is, of course, the opposite of bitter, because we know that when a year is over, we do reflect on what kind of a year it was. Was it a sweet year? Was it a bitter year? And this is just one other way to have a sweet year. And we might say to ourselves, look, let's between you and I, whether I have the apple or not, you think that's really going to make any type of a difference? I mean, this is just one of these Jewish things again and again that people do that really have no meaning. Well, that's up to each individual one of us because there is a prayer that we say about having a sweet year. And it certainly helps the mindset. Why? How many of us wake up in the morning or actually go through life feeling bitter? And if we just had the sweetness, the taste, the symbolism of something that is not bitter, especially around this time of the year where it is time for self reflection, wouldn't it make some sense at least to try something that's sweet? And if in fact we have had a sweet year and we want to have another sweet year, and it's something that is part of our tradition, then what's the harm? So, in other words, is there any downside? Now, here's something else which is not part of what you just picked up that actually you're going to be very happy about. And I don't know how many of us might be familiar with this strange custom. And that is as follows. It is customary, not required, it is customary at the meal for the first night of Shabbat, pardon me, Rosh Hashanah, to serve fish. I was thinking of gefilte fish for a moment. To serve fish. Now, that's fine. Normally, when we have a piece of fish, do we have the head on there? No. It is, however, a tradition and in some cases custom to serve the fish head on a plate. Now, I know your reaction. I can't see it, but I know your reaction, and you're going to say, that's disgusting. I would never do that. Here's another one of these Jewish things that are just way far. They have absolutely no application to the world today. Well, if we think about it, it might. So, what do I mean? First of all, it's called Rosh Hashanah. It does not mean the new year. It means the head of the year. Okay, if you take a look at a fish, the fish's eyes, whether it's alive or deceased, are always open. A fish's eyes are always open. And what does that mean? According to some interpretations, I'm not asking you to agree or not, I'm just sharing it with you. The interpretation is that God's eyes are always open. And God sees everything, which we're going to relate to a little bit later when we throw the bread in the river known as Tashlich. So God sees everything. And since it is the head of the year, we really want to be representative of the head of the year because that's what Rosh Hashanah means. But it also means something else, a little bit deeper. And again, you might say to yourself, okay, this guy is really making these strange connections which have nothing to do with life at all. But just open your mind a moment. So here we go. What would you rather be in life? Would you rather be a leader or would you rather be a follower? Would you rather be in charge of your own destiny or would you rather let somebody else be in charge of your destiny? Interesting point. And the representation of the fish on the head is symbolically supposed to tell us that we are supposed to head our lives. We are supposed to be leaders in our lives. We really shouldn't be followers. We should be independent. We should be the ones that are in control of not only our destiny, but also our future. Now, you might say to yourself, and I have no objections about this, you might say the following: you know what, if I don't put a fish head on my plate, you think it's going to change anything? I'm not going to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yet, when we begin to add symbols, it just might be a trigger point. Because don't forget what Rosh Hashanah is all about to begin with. It's all about reflecting on where we are on life and what we are going to do to make life better, if in fact we want to. And there's a motivational speaker by the name of Tony Robbins, and I'm assuming most of us are from South Florida who are watching this. And Tony Robbins is going to be in, I believe, West Palm Beach or somewhere here in South Florida, beginning his tour. And for those of us that are not familiar with Tony Robbins, he's a big, tall guy, and he's also known for his wonderful teeth and an exceptional motivational speaker. And guess what? He talks about, he's not Jewish, he talks about symbols and he talks about how to change your life. And what he talks about goes right back into what we do on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We reflect on who we are, we establish goals on who we want to be, and then we say to ourselves, am I really serious about doing that? And that's where all these symbols of the Rosh Hashanah come in. Whether we agree with them or not, well, that's another story. Whether we want to practice them or not, that's another story. But they are there to help us. All right. So here's another one. Another one which happens is something called Tashlich. All right. What is Tashlich? For those that are, some of you might be familiar with it. And that is on Rosh Hashanah after services on the first day. We go to a river, we take bread, we throw bread into the river, and the fishes eat it, and apparently we are casting off our sins. Wow. If life would be that simple, wouldn't it be great? So, where did this whole idea of the tashlich come from? And what is, again, the representation of the fish? Well, let's go with the fish. The fish is the one, which is the first animal, by the way, that God blessed in the Torah. First animal that God blessed is the fish. As I mentioned before, the fish opens up, the eyes are always open, which is a representation of God always going ahead and seeing everything we do. All right. Not asking anybody to buy into that, just relating. Now, what's the thing with the casting off of the sins in terms of the bread and throwing it to the fish? Because most people will tell us it's actions, not thoughts, that we are judged upon. And anytime that we take a physical action about anything, it helps to change our lives. And Judaism teaches that God allows us to think any horrid thoughts that we do, any horrid thoughts. We are not judged on the thoughts, we're judged on our actions. And if we take that extra step, even after spending 3.5 hours in a synagogue, which, by the way, the services for Rosh Hashanah at Mariposa do not take 3 hours, usually about an hour and 47 minutes. Okay? So I didn't want to scare you away when I said 3 hours. But when we go ahead and take the action of throwing the bread away, yes, it is symbolic. It is casting off our sins to a fish. So where does it come from? It actually comes from one of our old prophets, a fellow by the name of Micah. And he speaks of God casting the sins of Israel into the depths of the sea. He will again, as Micah writes, and I quote, he will again have compassion upon us. He will subdue our iniquities, and thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the seas. Now, this whole thing with Tashlich, by the way, has absolutely no reference in the Torah, and it has absolutely no reference in what we call the Talmud. It does begin around the year of 1425 when we find its first written reference by a fellow by the name of Jacob Molin, who was the author of Sefer Maharil. If anybody really has uh, wants to know that information. There are some that see the river as a symbol of primordial waters over which the Spirit of God hovers. Okay, now, there are some people that don't participate in Tashlich and they use the afternoon to study Torah, and that's okay. All right, talking about the Torah. By the way, I hope you're enjoying this. And I would much rather have an interactive conversation, but yet hopefully this information is good and important to you and gives you, as I mentioned earlier, some traditions about Rosh Hashanah that you never knew before, and you could decide to practice them or not, but at least you're absolutely familiar with them. All right, there is a custom to in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to visit grave sites. And who are these grave sites that we visit? It is that of the deceased relatives, usually parents. Okay, so what's the purpose of doing that? Well, some people might say we're preparing for the Yizkor service on Yom Kippur, the service that is added to help us memorialize, remember, and dedicate our good lives to those that came before us. And yet there is some other hidden reasoning behind it. And let me review this for you. Again, not saying we should agree or disagree. The belief originated that, and actually we do this during the month of Elul, which is the month preceding Rosh Hashanah, but some people do it in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It originated in the belief that the righteous deceased intercede for the living before the throne of God. So what does that mean? That means when you are going to a gravesite to visit a parent, a relative, a brother, or a sister, they have a direct connection to God, since their souls are closer to God, and that they will plead to God to give you a good life. All right, listen, it doesn't say that in the Torah, it doesn't say that in the Talmud. It is a custom, it is a belief. I don't know if that's true or not. But here's the interesting part. There is a part of Judaism that said that this particular idea that the dead intercede with God is actually anti-Jewish. Yep, you heard me say it. It is not supposed to happen. Why? Judaism says we're not supposed to talk to the dead. We're not supposed to do it. Interesting. What does that mean? That means Judaism admits that we can talk to the dead. I'm not saying the dead respond, but they also say don't. So there's a double-edged sword. So what's another reason? Another reason is it is an act of piety in the remembrance of lives worthily lived. And here's where I think the beauty of it comes in. When we go ahead and visit a grave of a relative, a parent, a brother, or sister, what do we normally do? Well, we put a rock on there. I'm not going to talk about that as to the reasons why, but we put a rock on there. And I think, at least this is what I do when I visit a grave of a loved one, is I reflect upon their life and I bring them up to date on my life. And I will say to my parents, yes, I'm still married to the wonderful Carol. My grandson kids are doing great. My son is doing wonderful. I remember the good times you and I had together, etc., etc., etc. But the part about reflecting on life is what we do on Rosh Hashanah. So there is an absolute another connection. It gives us another opportunity to reflect upon who we are. And if we had respect and we treated our parents with dignity and we treated them with admiration and we realized that our parents made us who we are, some will say they gave us flaws, some will say they gave us blessings. Both of those are true. We also have to, at most of those times, dedicate ourselves to continuing on the path that they gave us. Hmm. Is there a connection between that and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Absolutely, there is a connection. And what is that connection? That's what we do in synagogue. God, I follow your laws, just like my parents' laws, or I don't follow your laws, just like I disobeyed my parents. And this is my life that I'm living, and this is the life I would like to live. So there is another opportunity for us to reflect on life. And Tony Robbins and any other motivational speaker will say that that's what we should do. Reflect on who we are, how we got there, get rid of the bad thoughts that got us to do things that were wrong, and focus on the good things and move forward from there. And we do that at the gravesite, and we do that when we visit, when we go to shul and pray to God. Now, I'm going to divert for a moment. There has been many studies that suggested that only 35% of the Jewish people in America believe in God. In other words, 65% of the Jewish people do not believe currently in the existence of God. And I'm not going to enter into a discussion whether God exists or not. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of a story, not a personal one. So here it goes. It happened on Kol Nidre night in a synagogue to be named. And on Kol Nidre night, here's what occurred. The rabbi greeted people as they came into services. And the rabbi met a first individual, and I'm just going to make up a name, Mr. Silverstein. And the rabbi said to Mr. Silverstein, "Hey, it's nice to see you. Haven't seen you all year. How's the family? Everybody doing good?" Rabbi Silverstein says, "Yeah, you're looking good, Rabbi, blah, blah, blah." And the rabbi says to him, "Can I ask a question?" And Mr. Silverstein says, "Yeah, don't worry. Here are my tickets." And he said, by the way, tickets are not required at Mariposa. And he said the rabbi said, "No, that's not the question." He said to Mr. Silverstein, "Do you believe in God?" And of course, Mr. Silverstein said, "Yes." Rabbi said, "Welcome." All right. Next comes Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg, the rabbi asked, "Can I ask you a question?" Mr. Goldberg says, "Yes." The rabbi says, "You believe in God?" Mr. Goldberg says, "No, I don't." Well, the rabbi says, "May I ask you another question?" Mr. Goldberg says, "Yes." The rabbi says, "And why are you here?" And Mr. Goldberg says, "Just in case." Just in case. So I wanted to share that story with you as we move forward. Now, there's another tradition in the holidays time period, including Rosh Hashanah, that for those that follow this, you do not eat nuts. No nut eating. No peanuts, no pistachios, nothing. Wow. Your first question to yourself is, where does it say in any Jewish law you're not supposed to eat nuts? You know, I read the kosher stuff, I got that, but it doesn't say anything about nuts. What's this thing about nuts? Now, here's where it goes crazy. And I will tell you, here's where it goes crazy. In the Hebrew language, there is such a thing called gematria. What's gematria? Every Hebrew letter is assigned a number, which means, some of this you might know, Aleph means 1, Bet means 2, Gimel means 3, David means 4, etc. And as you go through the letters, it increases. There's a letter that means 1,000, there's a letter that means 100, etc., etc. Okay, so what somebody did is they sat down and they said, let me take the word for nut. And they took a look at the Hebrew word and they assigned the letters to it and came up with a number. Okay. Then they said, let me take a look at the word sin. Sinning. S-I-N, the Hebrew word. And they took a look at the word sin, which is chait, and they took a look at the letters and took a look at the numbers. And lo and behold, they discovered that the numerical value of the word nut and the numerical value of the word sin is exactly the same. Therefore, do not eat nuts. Woo! Wow, that's crazy. That's nuts. I really didn't mean to say that. That's crazy. Why would anybody even follow a rule like that? All right, good question. So why would anybody follow a rule about Friday the 13th? Why are there such things as lucky numbers or unlucky numbers? Are there connections? Are there not connections? Does it make sense or doesn't it make sense? Who knows? Should anybody really stop eating nuts? No. I mean, no one's going to come down and say, oh, you ate nuts on Rosh Hashanah. But on the other hand, maybe, just maybe, there was a coincidence or not. So I'll share something with you that I invented that I find very interesting. I hope you do too. We have something called the 613 mitzvot, commandments. We know that. And I was able to mathematically figure out that if a person follows the 613 mitzvot, they will live a great life. Yeah, mathematically, I was able to do that. How can I do that? It's very simple. How much is 6 times 1? 6. How much is 6 times 3? 18. What is 18 in Hebrew? Chai. What does chai mean? Life. Now, am I right? Am I wrong? Was this done by accident? Do I have too much time in my hands? I don't know. But there's about 12 others I discovered also, the 613. But anyway, so is there a possibility that this whole gematria numerical value stuff makes sense because somebody with a greater mind than us was able to put all that together? I don't know, but I certainly wanted to share that with you. I hope you're enjoying what we're doing so far. And there's some more stuff. So all right, let's go on. So now we have when you go to a synagogue on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you notice that the rabbi and cantor are not in their normal clergy attire. What are they wearing? They're wearing white, usually a white hat and a white kittel, as they call it. And why do they do that? Because white represents innocence and purity. And again, that's just another symbol. It also separates what the Rosh Hashanah holidays are from the plain days. So I think that's very important to remember and to understand. So it signifies what the holiday is about. And you might notice too that the Torah covers are white and the crowns are polished more for the extreme. But on the Torah itself, we have the special, when we carry them around, the special adorned crowns. Why the crowns? What do they symbolize? Well, remember in our prayers, we have something called Our Father, Our King. Now, I recognize that that is specific gender size. And there are some synagogues and there are some prayer books where some of those have been changed to either be gender neutral. And I'm not suggesting that's right or wrong. I'm not here to provide any opinion. But for the sake of this conversation, I am referring to it as Our Father, Our King. So then there's another representation when the crown is really representing God's kingdom. All right, let's go on with some more, and that is the following. What really is Rosh Hashanah? Well, number one, it's the head of the year. Now, when we say to someone Shana Tova, we believe or we're trained to suggest that that means Happy New Year. So if we don't know the Hebrew expression and we're amongst Jews during this time period, we'll go over to a Jewish fella and say Happy New Year. We think that's a translation of Shana Tova, where in fact it isn't. Because in Judaism, we do not say Shana, a Happy New Year. In Judaism, we say have a good year. And there is a difference between a happy year and a good year. Now, you might disagree, and that's fine. But what would you rather have? A long-term good year filled with blessings and opportunities and things that you were able to take charge of, or a happy year, or we just split and fine hairs? Well, that's up to you. But the right way to say it is have a good year. And here's why. You say Happy New Year. I got it. Listen carefully. How long does a new year last? How long does a new year last? Okay. Would you say Happy New Year to somebody January 30th? No, it's no longer a new year. You're into it. But by saying have a good year, you're including all 365 days. Yes. It's splitting hairs. I understand that. But you know, when somebody writes something or somebody edits something, writes a book, writes a column, writes a composition, the selection of the words that they use are impactful and powerful and lead to the interpretation that the author wants to have it led to. And they specifically use words. So if that's true, and I think you can agree it is, then why don't Jewish people have the same opportunity to do so? So thereby lies the difference between Happy New Year and have a good year. All right, let's go on. So there are four different names, believe it or not. Some of you might know this, but stay tuned. Just because you think you might know it, don't leave me yet. So we have four different names. We have Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of, and that's why we were focused so much earlier on things that having to do with a head. Okay. Number two, here it comes. Yom HaTruah, which means what? The day of the sounding of the horn. Okay, this is a custom. Now you all know this. You've been to services. You've seen the leader get up there and blow the horn, the ram's horn. And what kind of nonsense is that? It happens to be the focal point of the service. And this is the one that comes from the Torah. Because here's something you probably never knew. Never knew. Guarantee you. In the Torah, it doesn't say to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. They don't even call it Rosh Hashanah. They really don't. Okay. It says you're supposed to have a holiday of the sounding of the shofar, the sounding of the horn. Okay. And what does the sounding of the horn really signify? We know this. The alarm. It's time to wake up. Time to get out of your slumber. Time to get out of your what? Now, when we hear that from the clergy and it says, wake up, time to get out of your slumber, I know many of us say, come on, man, I'm not in a slumber. I'm doing fine. What is this slumber business? This doesn't relate to me. Yet, on the other hand, how many of us are in a rut? How many of us sometimes say, same thing, another day, another dollar? What's the difference between this day and the day that passed and all that kind of stuff? Does that represent a slumber if you're in a rut? Yeah, it could. So what the sound of the shofar says, okay, let's get up there, guys and gals. Let's really energize ourselves and get out of the rut. And who is in charge of getting out of the rut? Anybody? Us. That's it. We're the ones that can wake up in the morning fully energized, no matter what age we are, by the way. No matter what age we are, we can get up and we can get out from under. It also represents historical significance. And again, I'm sure many of us know this, so you don't have to ask for your money back. The shofar comes from the story of the binding of Isaac, when the horns got stuck in the thicket from the ram that came down to be the sacrifice. So that part we know. But the ram's horn has been used by Judaism to win battles and to win wars in the old days. The Battle of Jericho is one, and there are others. And by the way, the shofar is not only blown on Rosh Hashanah or the end of Yom Kippur. I don't know if you knew this. And that is at the beginning of the head of every month. I didn't say new month, the head of every month, because we do call it Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month. We blow the shofar. I don't know if you knew that on the morning services. Okay. So that is another time that the shofar is blown. And it is again telling us to wake up, get out of your rut. All symbolic, but yet all custom and tradition. And of course, it's also known as Yom Hadin. What does Yom Hadin mean? The day of judgment. Okay, whoa, that's tough. Whoa, what is he talking about? Well, we know this. God judges us. God says, okay, You've been good, you get another year. You've been bad, I got to make up my mind. Or that's it. That's tough. That's tough to accept. It really is. Yom Kippurim zeh, ad Yom Kippurim haba. From this Yom Kippur to next Yom Kippur. And we do that one prayer called Unisana Tokef. Who shall die, who shall live, who by earthquake, who by fire, who by this, who by that. Morbid, scary. God's judging us. How dare God judge us? Do we believe in that? Is it says in the Torah that God has a book of life? Does it says in the Torah that God has a book of death, the book of earthquakes, the book of this, the book of that? No. It is rabbinical. Doesn't mean it's not true. It is rabbinical. But it does teach us in the Torah that part of Judaism is we are being judged. Do we like to be judged? No, we don't. Who has a right to judge us? Who has a right to decree what our future will be? Who has a right to decree how we're going to live life? Regrettably, that is life. Listen, for those of us that work for a living, okay, what happens? You have a boss. And what does the boss do every day? Judge your value, judge your worth. Does your boss want you to remain with the same skills day in and day out without any self-improvement? No. Does the boss respect you and admire you more and promote you and give you more life rewards when you do better? The answer is yes. Does your boss fire you if you do not adhere to the rules of his rules, the rules of the company, the rules of the corporate culture, the rules of government, or whatever? Do they fire you? Yes. We're being judged every day. When we meet somebody for the very first time, are we being judged? Yes. But wait a minute. Forget about that part. Don't we judge other people? Yes, we do. Every day. Somebody we meet. We judge our bosses. I hate to say this, we judge our spouses, our family, our friends, our relatives. We judge everybody. I will stick with this person. I will not stick with this person. I will like this person. I will not like this person. I will like their values and judgments. I will not like their values and judgments. So even if we don't like this whole thing about life and death, it is a dose of reality for each and every one of us. That's the way life is. We are being judged. When we first start a job, we are given a book of laws for the corporation, the human relations laws, etc., etc. And either we follow them or we don't. If we follow them, good things happen. If we don't follow them, we're out the door. So even if we don't buy any of this stuff about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is fine, even if we don't buy any of it, even if we're there just in case, or even if we're there because our parents dragged us there and we drag our kids there and all that other stuff, and it has absolutely no meaning for us whatsoever. It is ways to understand how life works. How about that? And let's go to the next part of it. Rosh Hashanah also means the remembrance, the year of remembrance. You bet. As if everything we say about God, when we use this expression, we are restoring the symbolic language. God does not forget that he should require a period in which to remember. We are taught that every deed that we do, God remembers. Whether it's a good deed or a bad deed, we always remember that. And there is a little Hasidic story, which I'll share with you. It's very short. The proud man, conscious only of the little he has done, is forgetful of the wrongs he has committed. But God remembers the forgotten wrongs and forgets, as it were, the good so zealously recalled. But the humble man, whose failings are ever before him and who belittles his good deeds, God says, he has forgotten, but I will not forget. So let's see how we can apply this to life. How many times do we remember more so when somebody did something bad to us than we did something good? How many times have we severed a relationship with someone because they did something bad and we're not going to bother with them anymore? We're only going to remember that good part. We're not going to remember everything that happened up until that point that was good. You see, whether we believe in this whole thing about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, its traditions, its customs, its apples, its challah, its everything we talked about, the whiteness of it, we don't know. But it does give us an opportunity to understand what life is all about. And that's where some of the beauties come in. And let's go back to this whole foundation, if I can. And that is as follows. We believe that Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, is the birthday of the year. Whoa, there we go. Birthday of the world, I should say. The birthday of the world. And that would then say that we are going to be in the year 5,700 and something or other. And all this stuff about the world being created millions of years ago just doesn't fit into our religious parlay. And there are people that will say, and I'm not going to say whether they're right or wrong, that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of it is to understand the traditions and customs. And one of the traditions and customs is that we are now celebrating another year in the existence of the earth, long before humans were put on. How about that? So, with that being said, we're saying to it, yeah, this is Yom Harat. This is the day that the earth was created. Thank you, God, for creating the earth. Okay, happy birthday, Earth. Wonderful thing. Let's assume for a moment we don't believe in that at all. That's okay. It does give us an opportunity to understand what we are supposed to do to make sure the earth continues on. Look at the shape that it's in today. Horrible, isn't it? So when somebody has a birthday, yeah, we sing happy birthday and we're very happy for the moment and we try and give them a good life. We're supposed to do the same thing to the earth, which is one of the reasons, again, why we reflect upon this being a new year. But let's stop for a moment. Let's assume that 3-4 years from now, the leaders of the Jewish religion, the Reformed, the Conservative, and the Orthodox, they say the following. They say, you know what, due to lack of interest, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is canceled. Wow. It's done. It's finished. It lost its grip on the Jewish people. They for the most part they lost their connection to it. It's meaningless. It's false. It's phony. There is no God. There is no book of life. There is no book of justice. There's no book of this and that. It's all a bunch of hogwash. And finally, the American Jewish public has bought into that. So therefore, we have no other choice to cancel. How do you think Jewish people would react? What do you think? Well, let's make it a little bit more personal. How would you react? Because remember, one of the things that is really important is the festive meal, which I'll conclude with in just a few moments. The fact that they will take away Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we would probably object to it vehemently. Most will. Studies have been made. So what does that mean? I mean, somehow we don't want to lose that Jewish identity. We don't want to lose that Jewish tradition. We don't want to lose that Jewish part of us. And thereby, we are somewhat saying, you know what? Maybe this stuff doesn't make sense. Maybe all these symbolisms, all these customs, all these ideas make sense. All right. Then on Rosh Hashanah, we have the festive meal. What is one of the greatest things to do on Rosh Hashanah? Go over to somebody's house or have people come to your house and have a magnificent brisket. And what is with the brisket? The wonderful food that goes with it. The kugel and the matzo ball soup and the gefilte fish. And the night before, as we talked about the head of the fish. This is what makes us who we are. This is the tradition of the holidays. And then I'm going to skip forward a little bit and talk about when we don't get food. When don't we get food? On Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur has its own traditions, doesn't it? And we know about the fasting, and yes, it does say in the Torah we should fast. We know about the long services. We know about the Al Chetz, which is another one of our traditions. So I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on that at all, because I definitely wanted to focus on the meaning of the traditions of our life. The one thing, though, that I do want to go back before I forget, there is a tradition in Judaism not to wear leather shoes or leather belts. And the shoes have to do with a sense of comfort, and the belts have to do with the animals. So I'm not going to get that involved in it because most people, a lot of people, I should say, do not follow in that regard. So let me go ahead and give us a bit of a recap here. We talked about the round challah and the ladder challah and what the origins of the challah is. And now when we start to partake of them and eat them, hopefully we'll have a better appreciation. We talked about dipping the apples into the honey and what the symbolism of the apple is and why it's important to focus on a sweet year and forget about the bitterness of life. And for a moment, I just want to expand on that, and I apologize. We'll be done in just a moment or two. So, the one thing we want to remember is many of us, not all of us, many of us go through life, and I covered this, but I want to take it from a different point of view, that we wake up bitter. All right, we wake up pessimist. And it's not hard to do so in today's world. It is not hard to wake up being a pessimist when we see that everything that's going around us, including COVID, including wars, including famine, including fire, including everything else. I'm not trying to turn anybody into a downer. So even if that apple is one moment of sweetness, just one, hopefully it'll last just a little bit longer to talk about the positive and the optimistic part of it. We talked about changing the Torah covers, the visiting of the graves, having the good year, why we shouldn't eat nuts, why we throw bread into the water, why we celebrate the birthday, why we have the fish's head, and the different four names of Rosh Hashanah, and what it means to us personally, and what it symbolizes. So now I'm going to shock you with an unbelievable ending that you will not, you simply will disbelieve. But I will tell you to look it up because it happens to be factual. And here it goes. If you were to be asked who by religion are the happiest people in America, the number one answer that you will not volunteer are the Jews. There have been as many studies not done by Jewish people, not done by Jewish organizations, done by academia that have concluded many times that the Jewish people are the happiest people in America. Now, it might have some connection, you think, to wealth. That wasn't the reason behind it. Here's the truth. Judaism is one of the most positive religions that there is. We count our blessings. We give thanks for our blessings. For those that do so on a 3-time-a-day basis, the Orthodox, because they go to services 3 times a day and they reflect in their prayers upon the goodness that life has given them, they are the happiest of that group. And Judaism continues to reflect on the happiness, on the goodness, on the success of life. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are not downer holidays. One might think Yom Kippur is a downer because we cry, we sin, we did this, we did that. How could it be good? God's going to kill me if we believe in that. We say, my gosh. But Yom Kippur is one of the most optimistic holidays there is. At this point, you think I'm crazy. Yom Kippur is one of the most optimistic holidays there is. Why? Because we reflect upon the fact that when we do good things in life, if we don't want to do good things in our religious life, if we do good things in our secular life, good things will happen to us. It gives us hope. It gives us admiration. It gives us optimism. It gives us a direction of how to live a good life. And Judaism reflects on that. So, with all of that, on behalf of Mariposa, on behalf of myself, Andy Greenberg, I hope that you learned a lot today. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. I hope that I was able to share with you things you didn't know. And again, if that's true, just call up your Hebrew school teacher or principal and ask for your money back. And if you are someone that is interested in Mariposa, and this is just somewhat of a preview of what the residents here, we do get interactive discussions, which I missed. And man, they are good. They are very well attended. And again, the Friday night services are reflected of how Mariposa focuses on the spiritual needs and requests of the Jewish residents, as well as our really well attended Passover services, our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. And I knew I forgot one. We also do a Tu B'Shvat service, which usually happens around February or March. So my name is Andy Greenberg. I can't say it was nice to see you, but I do get because I can't see you. But it was an opportunity for us to get together. Should our paths cross again in the future, I very much look forward to your reaction of the time we spent together. And let me finally conclude by saying that each and every one of us should be written in the book of life, in the book of health, in the book of happiness, and in the book of sustenance. And until then, Shana Tova, have a good year. My name is Andy Greenberg. Thanks so much for being here.